Hello and welcome to Cycles of Time, your weekly guide to what's happening on Earth as we make our revolutionary journey around the sun. For time immemorial, our human ancestors have created myths and meanings to help us adapt and thrive as seasons change. Join me each week to explore the intersections of these ancient cycles, from the indigenous medicine wheel to the pagan wheel of the year, the Babylonian and Greek zodiac to the I Ching, the ancient Chinese book of changes. I'm your host, Allison Dale, and this is the Cycles of Time podcast. Hey everybody, welcome to Cycles of Time. This is your weekly forecast for April 21st through 27th, 2025. And this episode is called The Caring Bull. We are in the Wheel of the Year, week 5, just about a month after spring equinox. We arrive here in Taurus season. So welcome to Taurus season, the season of the bull. Quite fittingly, I'm recording this from Bocas del Toro, Panama, which means mouth of the bull. It was not planned to be here necessarily in Taurus season, but here we are. It's an island archipelago that is out on the Caribbean side of Panama, kind of towards the border of Costa Rica. And Bocas del Toro is named after a rock formation that Christopher Columbus saw on his, I think, 5th journey to the New World. And so this whole island group is called Bocas del Toro. It is a really incredible place. It is, looks just like what you might think of when you envision an island paradise with dolphins and sloths and red frogs and blue crabs and thriving starfish and white-faced capuchin monkeys and so many other living beings, plants and animals that are living harmoniously amongst the indigenous Ngobe people who grow cacao and plantains and fish for snapper in their wooden dugout canoes. There's a very thriving indigenous community here. This place is immense in its beauty and in its wildness, and it's also heartbreaking in how it shows the limits of sustainable human development, really on the surface. On one hand, I've seen the most pristine and vibrant living coral ecosystems that I've ever witnessed in my life. And on another hand, I've seen the most garbage and pollution that I've ever seen on a beach or in the water. There's a backpacker party tour here every week that carries drunken American and European 20-somethings on boats across the island, living that spring break party wild lifestyle and bumping heavy bass notes across the waters. And it's called Filthy Fridays. And Filthy Fridays, sadly that it matches up with its name of just like the plastic pollution and the amount of trash that there is at this point in certain parts of this island. But it's also one of the most beautiful places I've ever experienced. And it's, just feeling like talking a little bit about it. I've been traveling for a couple of weeks now through Panama and started up in the mountain region of Boquete, which is almost up at 5,000, 6,000 feet above sea level, up in these high mountains. And it's another very indigenous area where there's a lot of coffee being grown, coffee farms, as well as just a lot of the food for Panama and a lot of Central America is grown up there. Strawberries and any kind of food you can imagine growing. And it was a beautiful area, lots of wildlife and beautiful fresh flowing rivers. And then we took a windy mountain road down through a lot of Ngobe villages and arrived at a port town called Almirante and took the boat ferry across to Bocas del Toro. And I've now been here a week and been on a couple of the different islands, and they all have a different vibe. But I've been on a very pristine kind of remote island that had a pod of dolphins living in its waters nearby full time. And then another island that was filled with blue crabs that were like the size of a football that are just everywhere and come out at night and just surround the coconut, eating coconuts. And then and now I'm back on Bocas Island, which is the most populated island. There's a little town called Bocas Town here, and the rain is pouring down. These tropical Caribbean rainstorms are like nothing else I've ever witnessed. And just staring out the window of my little house that I'm renting and watching the rain pour down. So if you hear it in the background, that's what that is. But it is here that I'm noticing just how interconnected the people of these islands are. I've already witnessed how interconnected the wildlife and the animals are, and you can really see the circle of life, witnessing a jellyfish and then the dolphin eating the jellyfish and the fish eating the coral and the crabs eating the coconuts. And it's this amazing circle of being fed, feeding and being fed. And interestingly enough, that is what the human design gate that the sun is transiting through this week is all about. It is the gate of caring that the sun is transiting through, and known as nourishment in the I Ching. And it's all about being fed and how to feed the most people. And so it's really fascinating to be here in Bocas del Toro during Taurus season, thinking all about nourishment and interconnection between beings as the gate of caring is showing up in its energy. I've basically learned by being here that, there's a lot of tourism and immigration increasing around the world right now. I saw a map that there are just so many more people migrating and living in places other than their birth country than ever before. And I think it was Meta that had a recent data set that came out about human migration, and it's pretty wild. And this place is no exception. There are a lot of people moving here from other places and visiting here from other places. And as tourism and immigration increase in this really delicate environment of these mangrove islands, it's impossible not to see how the infrastructure of a small island chain really can't sustain the desire for partying in paradise and just drinking your cocktail with blinders on. No shame. I've been a backpacker. I've definitely traveled around, but I think that there's definitely a little bit of a disconnect between what the environmental impact is and the plastic bottles that are accumulating here in the archipelago. And there is an incredible castle here made out of plastic bottles that a German artist made, and it is all about, raising awareness about disposable plastics, and it's this huge castle made of plastic bottles that's really fascinating. But everything here in Bocas is off-grid. The water for drinking and bathing and everything else is collected in rain catchment barrels that are either personally owned by various establishments or distributed across the main town by the government. And the electricity is, for the most part, solar generated. And then the sewage, well, I know that there is sewage, but there are some issues, and they're working on it. They've been digging various sewage pipe systems throughout the town, and from what I've heard, kind of hiring a company and then hiring another one, and just with more and more people using the bathroom, it's like you see very dramatically how the consumption of food and plastic, and then the excretion that humans do is really catching up with such a delicate place. And the water here will occasionally run out in town because some people use too much, and so if they haven't had enough rain, there is a lot of rain, so it works. But if there hasn't been enough rain, and then the fancy hotels or resorts start using too much of their share, the water will completely run out. and you have to wait for more rain. And so it's dramatic. I've never been in a place where you can see your resource use so clearly and kind of where it comes from and where it goes. And so being in a place like this, you can really see very close to the surface how interconnected all of life is. It's this web of animals and plants and lands and waters, and then also the delicate web of resources that we all need to survive, like fresh water and clean air and soil and food, and basically how the greed or selfishness of a few can negatively affect the lives of so many people. And of course, this is not unique to this place by any means, but being here in Taurus season, thinking about like consumption and hunger and sensuality and all of the things that Taurus is associated with, and then seeing it all play out in such an obvious way, it really makes me so much more aware of how this same dynamic is operating at much larger scales across the globe. Just the unsustainability of our consumption. It's so apparent to me and making me feel a lot right now, feeling pretty sad about just this world and how much care it needs. And my heart feels throbbing right now. Bocas is also really interesting. This isn't going to be all about Bocas del Toro, I promise, but here I am in the middle of Panama. I have to talk a little bit about it. So I've learned that Bocas is a really radically diverse mix of people. There's, European and American and South American tourists and people looking for coming out here to try to find the next Key West or the next Costa Rica and kind of buy some investment islands. And it was recently on HGTV, I think, Home Garden TV. I saw something where it was a couple of women from the US who are here with a realtor looking for their own private island. They were getting tours of a lot of the smaller islands out here that are available for sale. And I think that's how many people in the U.S. might have heard of Bocas del Toro, was through HGTV. But in addition to that, there are a lot of indigenous folks who live in small villages without electricity, and really lovely people. The last place that I stayed had a lot of interaction and engagement with the people paddling by in their dugout canoes and fishing and doing some tours of the cacao that they're growing. And some of them were working at the restaurant and taught me some words in Nagobe, and it was really just beautiful to engage. But seeing, you could go out on a kayak and go past one of the villages, and at night it's completely dark. There's no lights whatsoever. And it was just really, really tranquil over there, a little ways out into the Caribbean. And now I'm back at the bit more busy part. And here all of the shops are owned by descendants of Chinese folks who came to work the Panama Canal. So there's a decently large Chinese population. And it seems like the administrators and government officials are all Spanish descendants from the time of Christopher Columbus, perhaps, and beyond. And then there's a lot of folks who came here from other parts of the Caribbean as well, like Barbados and Jamaica. And often that was to work at the Chiquita banana plantations that had a really firm stronghold here in these islands over the past 100 years or so. Before that, there were pirates from all over the place. The Spanish Armada taking gold back to Spain, and other kind of vigilante, mercenary type pirate folks who were trying to stop them. It was a Spanish-British battle for resources over here. And so reading the history is just mind-boggling. But all of these different people, the Barbados and Jamaican folks, the other Caribbean folks, speak a certain don't speak Spanish, but a kind of Creole patois blend. And I was sitting at a little hole-in-the-wall fonda, which is a name for like a little restaurant, last night, eating a coconut fried snapper, and just hearing a mix of so many languages, Spanish and Dutch and English and German and patois Creole, and just really I closed my eyes and I was just imagining how many different people are surviving and thriving together on this little island. So being in Bocas right now is proving to be an in-depth and up close and personal contemplation on this human design gate of caring. And caring at its essence is really all about recognizing that we're not in this alone, recognizing that how we treat the larger community and the collective deeply influence the quality of life for everyone, including oneself. So later this week on Sunday, the new moon in Taurus is falling in the last section, the last hours of the Gate of Caring. And so this first full gate of Taurus season is really setting the stage for the nature of the month ahead, the nature of the archetype of the bull. And so I'm thinking about this archetype a lot more now. Like, I used to think of the bull as like more of a lone animal that is kind of forced to fight the matador in the bull ring, or the bull standing proud on Wall Street. There's these images in the West of this bull, this kind of lone, stoic, strong bull. But right now I'm really thinking, as I exist on these islands and with all of the bugs and the birds. Oh my gosh, there's a little hummingbird right outside the window, bathing in the rain on a leaf. Oh my gosh. And as I scratch a mosquito bite. So I'm in it, guys. But I'm just thinking a lot more about how, yeah, cows and bulls and this animal of Taurus season is not about that lone Wall Street bull, but rather a herd animal, an animal that lives in a herd and who nurtures and cares for the rest of their community and has a herd mentality, which means that they move and act like a group. So thinking of the bull as, a being that's motivated by the need to stay together for safety and to maintain social bonds, and kind of like dolphins, being in this dolphin area of the world and reading and learning about dolphins. They also have this pod mentality. It's very similar to the herd mentality. And, both dolphins and cows will go to a stressed or injured pod or herd mate and lie with them and stay with them until they're better. They do not abandon their crew. And cows, interestingly enough, I learned recently, also engage in allo grooming, which is a behavior that reinforces social relationships, and it seems to be mutualistic, which means that cows tend to groom those that have previously groomed them, and they care for each other in this reciprocal way. So this communal mentality and social structure are so crucial for the well-being of cattle herds and dolphin pods and many other communal animals, and I would say especially humans. So it's time to take a note from Taurus, the bull, this sign who's deeply immersed in the sensuality and the senses of their environment. But the environment is not just the land that we live on, but it is the other members of the herd, the other members of the pod. So that is the energy that I really want to emphasize going into this week with, is that communal care. And as we enter Taurus season and the Gate of Caring, we have a few astrological transits this week that are, pretty big energy. We have a tense T-square between Mars and Pluto and the Sun. And then Saturn is conjunct Venus and the North Node, kind of alternating with the exact conjunction, but they're all very close together in Pisces this week. And then there's that new moon in Taurus on Sunday, which is also activating the Mars-Pluto T-square. So let's let the portal of transformation that we've been in continue. We're done with retrogrades, we're done with eclipses, but now we're into a Mars-Pluto T-square, Mars-Pluto Sun-Moon T-square, and Saturn conjunct Venus in the North Node, a very rare conjunction for all three of those to be together at the end of Pisces. So there is a lot going on. We are today, Monday, if you're listening to this, still in the gate of ordering, which means sprouting or difficulty at the beginning, and I talked a lot about that last week. But from Tuesday through Sunday, we move into nourishment, or the gate of caring, and mountain over thunder. And I think that's about it. You can look at the Substack at astrosomatics.substack.com to see the full list of the Wheel of the Year transits with the medicine wheel and the pagan season. We're inching our way towards Beltane. Next week will be the celebration of Beltane, or May Day, in the pagan Wheel of the Year. But I'll let you take a look at that if you like, and subscribe and sign up at astrosomatics.substack.com. I also just sent out my Taurus season workbook that has journaling prompts for every week of Taurus season, as well as a lot of information about the astrology transits, the human design story, the 5-element wheel, and the elemental nature of the season. And so that is a workbook that I put together every month for my paying subscribers. My paid membership on Substack is called Embody the Revolution, and it is a community reflection of these energies that we're transiting through. You get this PDF workbook, as well as some live breathwork sessions and community reflection sessions. And it's a work in progress. I'm figuring it all out as far as how to best engage, but it's just a way to go deeper into really learning about the Wheel of the Year from all of these different angles, and being able to communicate, talk about it, ask questions. So come to astrosomatics.substack.com or astrosomatics.com, and you can sign up through either one of those for this Embody the Revolution membership. Moving along a little bit to Taurus season, and we'll talk a little bit more about the gate of care and the astrology of the week. So, caring, just having that be the theme this week feels so poignant. Sometimes I record this podcast and I'm just like, I wait a little longer to record it. I don't record it the week before, and I let the week that I'm releasing it creep up, and I'm like, whoa, there it is. There's that focus, there's that energy, and it oftentimes feels so synchronously aligned with what is happening in my life. I spent the past week or two in Panama with my extended family, my parents and sibling and in-law and child, and it was a lot of thinking about care. A lot of care came to the surface, and I've been kind of processing and distilling that. And most of the travelers went home a few days ago, so I'm here reflecting on the experience with my partner and my daughter, our tiny little trio. But traveling with multiple generations of family was definitely a big process of navigating chaos of meeting basic needs and trying to have fun at the same time and get everybody's needs met, from transportation to health and food and daily adjustments just in your body in a new climate. And I'd say that traveling with people you love is always an invitation to stretch and to soften expectations and practice patience and meet each other in the moment. So this has all been a real reminder that care is not always comfortable. Care is not always aesthetic. It's sometimes getting up to cook breakfast when you're exhausted, or choosing to stay quiet, or showing up when you'd rather pull away. It's just, care can look like a lot of things. And so as the natural world roots deeper into the spring season, we can really start to notice right now what care actually looks like in practice, and reattune to what really matters in our lives when it comes to caring for the people around us. Taurus season, generally, a little bit about this, is a slow season. It's not for the rush or high-speed growth. after Aries season was all about using that strength and energy, that Martian energy, to sprout up out of the seed of Pisces season. But Taurus is when the sprout reaches its point of flowering. It comes into full bloom. And so it's here for the present moment, that a flower has to exist in the present moment. It's fleeting, but it's present. It's embodied. And Taurus season is kind of all about the wisdom of consistency and presence in the body. Taurus rules the throat, the neck, and the jaw. And, Aries ruled the head. It ruled the upper part of the head and the mind, and kind of the horns sprouting out and budding outward like a ram. But Taurus is all about the throat, neck, and jaw. And this reminds us that expression and truth begin in places where tension gathers. So our throat is a very sensitive part of our body. It's the place where we speak from, the place where we swallow, the place where we ingest food. It's a very important part of the body, but it's also a place where we can hold a lot of tension. And so during Taurus season, I recommend thinking about your throat, giving some love, maybe a little massage to your throat and your lower jaw. We hold so much tension there. And oftentimes it's surrounding what we are saying or not saying, what we're holding in our body that needs to be sung or released or just simply acknowledged through our throat. In human design, the throat center is the place where everything is transmitted. All of the other energy centers of our body come out through the throat. And so it's this place that's really important to speak our mind. I think a lot of Taurian people can seem stubborn, and that's definitely a characteristic of the sign of the bull. But in my mind, the Taurus identified folks that I know do tend to be very clear in their vocalization of what it is that they want. And that's a big part of Taurus season, as you will see coming up in the coming weeks. There's some gates that are directly related to speech and releasing our inner world to the outer world. In the human life cycle, Taurus is correlated with toddlerhood. So Aries was infancy, Aries was birth, and then toddlerhood is the bull. Toddlerhood is that stubborn bull. You know how stubborn little toddlers can be, and also how inspired they can be with the sensory experiences of life. In toddlerhood, everything is sensual and physical and direct, and you're touching the world and you're smelling the world and you're tasting the world as a toddler. And so that is what Taurus is associated with, is learning through the body and learning through pleasure and learning through pain and learning through repetition and consistency. So Taurus carries the energy of security, this needing to feel safe and held. There's a lot of that emphasis there. And as a toddler, you recognize kind of what your boundaries are. You're testing your boundaries of what you can do in the world, and really testing that to see what is safe and what's not, so that you can fully express yourself. So without safety, expression is stifled, but with safety, we can blossom and really bring through all of the things that we're experiencing through our senses. So that's Taurus season, how I really love to look at all of the zodiac signs through the lens of the life cycle and through the lens of where the correlation is in the human body or in the zodiac man. And so embodiment, voice, and safety and security is a big piece of Taurus season through that lens. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on what Taurus means to you, the associations that you have with Taurus as we move to a distinctly different energy from Aries season. Moving on a little bit to the astrological weather of the week, we have a fixed T-square and a test of integrity. So this week, like I mentioned, brings a pretty potent and pressurized alignment in the form of a fixed T-square. So it is, an opposition between Mars in Leo and Pluto in Aquarius across the wheel, and they're both squaring the sun in Taurus. And all of these signs, Leo, Aquarius, and Taurus, are fixed signs. They're in the middle of the season. So we have a cardinal sign, which is the beginning of a season. Fixed sign is right in the middle, and mutable signs are at the end of a season. So all of these are fixed, and fixed sound is what it sounds like. It's a bit of a kind of rigid understanding that is not very movable. And Scorpio is the other fixed sign, and it does not have any planetary activations currently, except maybe Black Moon Lilith is over there, but I digress. It doesn't really have anything feeding into this T-square, but oftentimes the other sign that would complete the full cross of a T-square is actually a place where you want to focus some energy and think about what can be released from all of the tension of these other signs. So Scorpio is another sign to consider. So if you have Taurus, Scorpio, Aquarius, or Leo placements, this might affect this T-square this week might be bringing some things to the surface for you. It can bring intensity and friction and kind of a tug of war, but it also has a potential for real transformation if you are giving it some space and time and willing to stay present with it. Mars in Leo. So Mars just moved last week from Cancer into Leo, new energy for Mars. And so it's basically, we're going to feel that regardless of the T-square. But Mars in Leo is charging in with a lot of boldness and ego and the desire to be seen and recognized and celebrated. After all that time that Mars was in Cancer, it was retrograde in Cancer and then came back in direct motion and just stayed in Cancer for quite a long time. And so in Cancer, Mars kind of felt a little bit in a cave, perhaps a little bit in a shell, and Mars wants to be big and bold and action oriented and assertive, but in Cancer it was a bit like being in a crab shell. And now we're entering Leo, so Mars is really charging in and has this fire of self-expression, and Leo is known for creativity and leadership, and so it's a pretty potent placement for Mars, but when it's provoked, it can definitely turn into defensiveness or having an urge to dominate. And then on the other side of the zodiac, Pluto is in Aquarius, where it'll be for the next 20 years. And this is pulling us deep into the collective undercurrents that are happening. Aquarius is about collective expression, where Leo is about self-expression, and they're across the sky from each other, kind of playing tug-of-war about how we care for ourselves and get recognized and express ourselves fully, while also looking into how we are expressing at a collective level. And Pluto there, the Lord of the Underworld, brings power dynamics that are embedded within systems and communities and ideologies to the surface. So this Leo-Aquarius axis is pretty powerful, and it will be affecting us for the next many years, with Mars making its orbit around the Sun and Pluto inching its way through Aquarius. So every couple of years we'll be getting these Mars takes a couple years to go around the Sun, and so it'll be hitting up with an opposition to Pluto every couple of years for the next 20 years. And so we'll be feeling this and feeling the evolution of this. But it's really a transformational energy through exposure and the death of old structures and the emergence of deeper truths about the collective that have been simmering beneath the surface. And Mars in Leo is all about kind of how we personally react to that, whether it's defensively, whether it's with anger and rage, or whether it's with the recognition that we as individuals, Leo is the individual, how we can show up as part of the collective. So personal expression, collective expression is what we're dealing with. And then the Sun, having just entered Taurus, is at the apex of this T-square. So it becomes the focal point for all of this tension. And Taurus is the sign of embodiment and values and stability and resource. and it moves slowly. It wants to hold and tend and trust and care. But under the pressure of this square and this opposition between Pluto and Mars, even Taurus is being challenged to examine what it's holding on to and why. So it is a cosmic moment of reckoning. We had a Mars-Pluto opposition last November 2024, and again in January 2025. So this is the third time that this has happened, this opposition, because of the Mars retrograde. And so if anything, if you can think back to November and January, if there's anything that came to the surface as far as a tension between the collective and your personal expression, that'd be something to look at. But this is the first time that Taurus season has been squaring this. And so it's really about looking at these structures that we are holding on to and asking ourselves if they're still in alignment with our deepest values or if they're just familiar and safe. So there's a lot of really amazing stuff that can come out of this, but it won't feel comfortable necessarily. The energetic signature of a fixed T-square is stubborn intensity. And like I said, it's not easily moved. So breakthroughs under this configuration often come after a building sense of frustration or an internal crisis. You might feel caught between competing desires right now. There's the urge to act, the need to transform, and the instinct to stay grounded. Action is Mars, transformation is Pluto, and groundedness is Taurus. And so all of these are in a square angle. They're kind of in a standoff. So you might experience this tension in your relationships or your work or personal growth as power struggles or emotional eruptions or an inner battle between pride and humility. So give yourself some grace this week. And if you can breathe through the tension, you have a chance to act from a place of integrity rather than reactivity. And you can just ask yourself can I hold my ground while I'm still evolving? Can I move forward without abandoning my center? We're at a precipice here between allowing change in and still feeling safe enough to grow like that toddler. So that's happening. And amidst this backdrop, we also have another pretty powerful combination of planetary alignments this week. Venus, Saturn, and the North Node of the Moon are all in Pisces. And this is a different rhythm than this T-square energy, but it's all happening around the same time. I'm not giving specific dates for these because they're kind of just the general energy of the week. We have slow-moving planets of Saturn and Pluto that are kind of holding that energy, and then Venus is moving more quickly through, and the sun's moving more quickly through. So there are various times when these are exact, but as I'm doing a weekly forecast, it's just the overarching energy of the week will hold both of these alignments. So Venus Saturn North Node conjunction is a different kind of rhythm. It is in the late degrees of Pisces, and Pisces energy doesn't compete or control. It's all about softening and dissolving and reminding us that surrender is also a form of strength. Venus in Pisces elevates love to its most unconditional form. It's boundaryless love. It's valuing boundarylessness, merging, interconnecting with all beings. And Saturn in Pisces, where it's been for the last couple of years before it enters Aries, Saturn has been asking us to build spiritual discipline and take responsibility for our dreams and emotions without collapsing into fantasy and avoidance. Saturn is all about responsibility. It's kind of like the banks of a river in Pisces, where you have to have riverbanks to allow the river to flow. Otherwise, it'll just be a flood. And so Saturn is bringing that structure and discipline to this dreaminess of Pisces. And then the North Node here, the nodes of the moon travel backwards across the zodiac. So while Saturn and Venus are headed for Aries, the North Node is headed backwards from Aries into Pisces. And the North Node is pointing to what we're hungry for. It's our evolutionary path collectively. And so the North Node is showing us that right now, humanity as a collective is hungry for empathy and sensitivity and interconnectedness. And so they're all meeting together in kind of countercurrent of grace. It won't be an easy transit either, but it really balances out that tension between Mars and Pluto, the great malefics, and the sun in Taurus. And so Pisces is this mutable sign. It's about flow. It's about currents. And all of these planets meeting up here, Saturn, Venus, and the North Node, planets and points, are reminding us that power is not always loud and that not all battles have to be fought with swords, not all mountains are volcanoes, and that sometimes the deepest transformation comes when we stop resisting what life is showing us and we simply allow it to flow and let it move us. Let your breath breathe you. So this week is not an easy week astrologically. It's not about easy answers by any means, but it's more so about staying in the fire long enough to let something meaningful be forged and let the tension and the pressure show you what matters and what ultimately will ground you in the long term. And although there might be some discomfort this week, we can let discomfort realign us sometimes and remember that the strongest trees are the ones that bend, not the ones that refuse to move. So use this mutable North Node Venus Saturn for a little bit of a salve to this T-square energy, recognizing that although we feel a lot of fixed energy and stubbornness and frustration building, we can lean into a little bit of surrender, know that it's like the higher purpose is valuing that surrender and recognizing the interconnectedness, that it's not just about us. Which brings me to gate 27 and the gate of caring. In the I Ching, so this is again from Tuesday the 22nd through Sunday the 27th. The sun is moving through this gate, and in the I Ching, it is known as providing nourishment, and it's symbolized by the mouth. It's a reminder that nourishment is not just physical but energetic. So Bocas del Toro, the mouth of the bull. Here we are in literal mouth of the bull. I'm tripping out a little bit by all these synchronicities in my life right now. But it's this gate of caring is about what we consume, what we give, and what we withhold, and how all of those things shape the systems that we live within. In the Gene Keys, gate 27 follows the arc from the shadow of selfishness through the gift of altruism to the city of selflessness. And this gate is asking us to examine our relationship with giving and receiving, not just whether we give, but why we give. So the shadow of selfishness in this lens is not necessarily about taking too much, but it's about becoming imporous and closed off from the living field of the collective. So sometimes selfishness can look like giving from the wrong place. It can be actually selfish to give of yourself when you know that the energy is not being received. And that is what I mean by being imporous. If we're porous to life, we are actually altruistic because we're recognizing that we're one node in a much larger web of ecosystem. But selfishness can look like just saying, oh, I'm going to do it all myself. And even if that seems like you're just taking care of yourself, you are shutting yourself off from this living field. And so when we act from selfishness, we isolate ourselves from the natural mathematics of life. Life is this rhythm that operates like a mycelial network or a dolphin pod or a herd of cattle, which is always attuning and always responding and always sharing. This week, a couple days ago, like I mentioned, I was staying off on another island in what's known as Dolphin Bay, where about 50 to 100 bottlenose dolphins live year-round. And they live there because they're feeding on the abundant jellyfish that are born and gather in these warm Caribbean waters, this huge, beautiful bay. And so every day that I was there, it was this very peaceful. There was like one other couple, German couple staying at this hotel, and then the owners, and then a couple of the people working there. But it was like very, very tranquilo. And we could go out on kayaks and watch dolphins. And I was able to witness dolphins from a kayak circling around a boat and noticing how and also the manta rays too. There was a lot of manta rays out there that you could see in groups, and where they kind of surface in unison, rest together in silence, glide together in groups. And dolphin pods, just like cattle herds, are a ecosystem of unspoken communication. They're communalist animals. And so, again, really wild to be in a place where I'm able to witness this physically. I was listening to the Gene Keys audiobook, and Gate 27. In that chapter about the Gate of Caring, Richard Rudd, the author of the Gene Keys, started talking about dolphins. And as I was in this Dolphin Bay, and I didn't expect that, but he was talking about the pod mind, which is this invisible psychic web that unites creatures like dolphins and elephants and wolves and cows and ideally humans. So if one dolphin in the pod is in danger, the others respond immediately and don't leave it behind. And true caring is shown through this pod mind, which is instinctual and intelligent and self-sustaining. It has a larger collective intelligence that isn't just about the individual member. But as humans, as we know, we don't always live from that place. And the shadow expression of Gate 27, selfishness, can show up as self-centered giving, which I want to hit on again because I think it's really important. It's basically giving from a place of unspoken expectation or with an agenda. And on the surface, that type of giving may look generous, but underneath, it's not really a heart-led giving, but more of a mental giving, or what Rudd calls political giving. And so when that expected return that you have in your mind of what you should get from being generous doesn't arrive, resentment really flares up. So that's one of the shadow sides of this energy of this week, is this kind of, oh yeah, I'm giving and I'm being generous, but it's not really coming from an altruistic place of the heart or a communally, it's more of a tit for tat kind of thing. And then on the flip side, we might overgive to avoid guilt or in an attempt to earn love. But this self-sacrificing style of care really erodes the self and also leads to burnout, because care becomes a transaction rooted in fear instead of in connection. And so it's another part of the shadow. There's in the Gene Keys, there's usually a reactive nature of the shadow and a repressive nature of the shadow, where they're both acting out of fear, but one is kind of more bringing that energy inward and one is reacting outward. So yeah, self-centered overgiving or political giving, both are sides of the shadow that could show up this week. And the turning point of this gate is clarity. in order to churn from selfishness to altruism, you have to have a kind of inner integrity that arises when we know what we have to give and we give it without depletion. And altruism is a contentious word. It's a contentious concept, I would say. People have a lot of different thoughts about what this means, but I would say it's not about martyrdom. It's more so, and this was pulling from Richard Rudd's Gene Keys as well, that altruism is a form of intelligence, and it's a deep biological and energetic sensitivity to what is needed and when. So it's not just overgiving to whoever, just to anybody who, out of a sense of wanting to get something in return or wanting to avoid confrontation. It's more like an intelligence that recognizes that where you put your energy carves pathways, and so it doesn't feed victim consciousness, and it knows where its energy belongs. When you're giving from your heart, you can feel the strings tugging at your heart saying, oh, I need to give here because it's going to feel good for not just who I'm giving to, but for myself to give my energy there. It's creating that mycelial network connection between beings. And so it's not really a moral thing of like, I should give to this or I should give to that, but it's just like an energy more like a mother feeding her baby or a dolphin returning to its wounded pod mate because it knows it needs to protect the integrity of the whole pod. And it's a certain giving that is based on the flow of life, the flow of that invisible intelligence of nodal networked energy that I think we're just starting to hit on a little bit with, magnetic resonance and the, thinking about like heart resonance and moving from the mind and the tit for tat nature that the mind always works in of like, if you do this, then I'll do that. And then if this, and then that. But if you're working from the place of the heart, giving, you'll recognize that giving feels differently. And it's, I think we're all headed in this direction. I think the more we learn about the networks that exist, the invisible networks, the more we can see that we are so much a part of those invisible networks and kind of dance within that rhythm that is more felt than thought. So, as I've moved through this week with family and traveling with family, these teachings have landed in just very simple ways. It's, preparing a meal, or if somebody mentions they need some, they're having a bit of a stomach upset, bringing out a probiotic pill. If somebody has a little itch, here's this. Having things that are caring for what people need, not only when they ask directly for it, but just recognizing what is needed in the larger group to make it so that everybody's happy. When you have a little girl that is covered with bites and she needs to, the only way that you're going to sleep is if you make sure that she is taken care of and has the ointment she needs and everything like that, then it's very, very obvious that like, I'm going to sleep better if I help her first. Like putting on your mask in the plane before, or putting on yours before helping somebody else. Yes, do that. If you're like too tired to cook, too tired to do something, then stepping back and allowing somebody else to rise to the occasion. So it's it's a rhythmic noticing. It's a paying attention to other members of the herd, and then also recognizing that you have to also pay attention to yourself and know when to step back, know when to ask directly what you need instead of guessing to other people. And so it's not a simple caring is not simply about over providing or getting to that place of martyrdom. And I think oftentimes care can be misconstrued as overgiving in our culture, but it is really more of a dance, a listening, and an attunement that is about feeling instead of thinking ahead. So the Gene Keys, another interesting thing in this Gene Keys chapter was talking about a 7-year cycle of nurturing and how in early childhood, consistent presence from attuned adults forms the foundation for resilience and inner strength. And this first 7 years of a child's life is where the pod mind really begins. So when a child is truly cared for in those early years, they may remain connected to this pod mind field for life. So as I have an almost 7-year-old daughter, and I'm very much having to tend to her needs, and she's showing me so much of her inspiration and joy in return. It's really just so amazing to see how that is paying itself forward, connecting her to the field of attuned presence to what's going on around us. And in Taurus season, this phase of toddlerhood, we're reminded that care is developmental and really builds the bones of the future. And it's never too late to start being more attuned to the world around us. I think that in a world where more people are nourished and supported than at any time in history, it still feels like there's a huge lack of care in a lot of ways. And in my previous life, as I was a director of a tech company, we had some core values that we discussed with our teammates and that everybody knew about, and they were initially called the 3 C's. They were community, curiosity, and compassion. And at one point along the way, as I was doing some HR related people management stuff, I added on the 4th C of care. And first, my team was like, well, why do we need this? We already have compassion. And I think that compassion is a huge component of care, but care is the action of compassion. It is acting upon the empathy that we feel, the compassion that we feel for others, and that is important. As Mars moves into Leo and transits through that, we will notice that action and expression of what is going on in our hearts and in our minds is more and more important. And so we are, at this point in history, there are more people who have basic needs met than probably any other time of history, but it still requires a lot. And Richard Rudd says we're standing at the edge of a quantum leap in human evolution that hinges on the transcendence of selfishness and moves us towards this universal altruism and heart-centeredness. And I sure hope so. The only way this would be done would be not through martyrdom or self-erasure, but through wholeness and remaining porous, seeing the trash on the street and picking up as much as you can, but also not letting it wear you down so much that you feel like helpless in the situation. I think being attuned to the world around us and taking the time in your little room by yourself as much as needed in order to be able to go back out into the world and stay porous and not build up walls around yourself is the most important thing here, because this porousness of care allows love to flow in without needing to hold on to it too tightly. It reminds me of that structure of Saturn-Venus conjunction with the North Node this week, which is about creating channels through which water can flow through, but not making them so rigid that they have to overflow and flood the system. So there's a quiet kind of power in real care, and it nourishes both the giver and the receiver. It creates coherence between multiple hearts, multiple beings. And care reminds us that we're not alone and that we're each a part of a living, breathing whole. And that has never been more apparent to me in my waking life than it is at this very moment. So to finish up today, I will talk a little bit about this Taurus new moon on Sunday, April 27th. It's occurring at 12:30 p.m. PST. And it's where the moon is meeting the sun in the gate of caring, this gate 27. And then it stays in its new phase as the sun and moon both shift into gate 24, which is known as the return in the I Ching, and it's known as the gate of rationalization in human design. And so this new moon is going to carry both of these energies. It's like a culmination of this gate of caring that I just talked about, which is, new moons are always about manifesting and planting seeds, and Taurus can be associated with beauty and abundance and material abundance, so you can plant seeds about that. But it's also about realigning your life with your values and recognizing, what are you caring for? What are you nourishing? What are you giving energy to? And does it really sustain you? It's questions to ask on this new moon. And this new moon is a seed point, as all new moons are, and this one is rooted in the earth. So it doesn't ask for speed, it doesn't ask for intensity, but it asks for commitment and clarity and consistency. So if you've been overgiving or undernourishing yourself, this is a moment to reset. And if you've been scattered, this is a good time to focus. So let the soil of your life be rich and real, not just pretty on the surface. Later, after the gate of caring, the sun and moon both transit into the next gate of Taurus season, this gate of rationalization, which I like to call the gate of transmuting addiction to innovation. The shadow in the gene keys is addiction, and the gift is innovation. And I love the quote from this gene key that addiction thinks in circles and invention or innovation thinks in spirals. And so this gate that the new moon's energy will hold as well as is associated with the process of returning to ideas or thoughts and seeking understanding and meaning. It's a cycle of contemplation, or a spiral of contemplation, where the mind can revisit concepts to gain clarity or insight, and then shift something subtly to get to that next layer of the spiral, rather than kind of thinking in the same loop. So this new moon, it might be tempting to get to a place where you're thinking in a loop and thinking in a circle, but if you just think about what you've learned through the gate of caring and remain porous to the world around you, then you can kind of up level into that next layer of the cycle and gain some more insight and have truly innovative thoughts. So in the context of the new moon, this transit could encourage introspection and the reevaluation of beliefs or patterns that you've felt stuck in. And it is a time that supports mental clarity and the potential for breakthroughs and understanding. It invites a balance between rational thought and intuitive knowing, and really helps us connect the outer environment and the herd and the pod mind with our own inner truth. So it's a bit more of like bringing what is outward and outside and within everyone else and bringing it back to our personal heart center. So this alignment offers an opportunity to reflect on personal narratives and consider new perspectives that are aligning with your evolving sense of self. This Taurus new moon is, again, pretty notable because along with the sun, it's forming that T-square with Mars and Pluto that I mentioned, which can create a bit of tension between self-expression and the needs of the collective. But through this process of thinking in spirals rather than in loops, we can take actions for positive change, and by focusing on care, that can help us get there. So let's take that momentum to make the shifts that we've been contemplating. And some questions to reflect on over the course of this week are, what does care mean to me right now? Where am I overextending and where am I withholding? What am I feeding in my life, and is it truly nourishing? Where in my body do I hold unspoken truths, and how can I begin to release them? And how can I create more space for slowness, simplicity, and presence? Taurus season teaches us that the most lasting growth begins in stillness. Imagine a beautiful bull or a herd of cattle laying in a flowery meadow. It's this season of spring, this Easter energy. If you see Easter cards or Easter iconography around, you see this like beautiful colors, tulips and daisies and bunnies and all of these animals and plants that are in this full fruition of just that stillness of spring. So that's where we're at. And we have to recognize this season that the voice that we long to express has to be rooted in the body and in the sense of presence in order to hold power. And that is what's truly caring, is to come from our internal sense of power and presence. And that care is not performative, it's a practice. So may this week bring you closer to the ground beneath your feet and to the truth that lives in your own mouth, waiting to be spoken. Let it be simple, let it be real, and let it be enough. Thank you for listening to Cycles of Time, as always. It's been really fun to contemplate all of these intersecting energies this week and slow down enough to do it in a way that doesn't feel like I'm just ticking a box. Sometimes over the past little while, this spring has felt so rushed in so many ways, and I think that some of my episodes or writings have kind of just been a little bit of like ticking the box, I have to do this, and I really haven't liked that. So I'm really looking forward to slowing down and connecting with the energies of the moment, because they truly are changing week by week. And so I appreciate all of your support and all of your engagement and all of you who have supported me by joining Embody the Revolution membership. And I really look forward to seeing how that evolves over the course of this year. Apologies for some of the flexibility that's been needed as I've navigated traveling in a country that is unknown to me with limited internet. So we are carrying on through the changing winds of life. And if you'd like to join that membership, you can subscribe at astrosomatics.substack.com or on my website at astrosomatics.com. You can also subscribe for free to get this missive in your inbox every Monday. I am switching back to Mondays from Sundays again, just based on feedback. So yeah, I'd love for you to join. I'm almost at 400 subscribers. I have like 5 more to go. So come on, join the show. And I will talk to you all next week, where we're going to dive into the changing of the seasons in the pagan wheel of the year with Beltane, May Day, the fire festival. So I will talk to you then. Have a beautiful, beautiful week ahead.